Why was everyone staring at her again? The morning sun cut across the parade deck at Camp Pendleton, turning the concrete into a mirror of blinding light. Corporal Kira Brennan walked through it like a ghost among the living, steady, silent, and unbothered on the surface. Her boots hit the ground in perfect rhythm, each step too precise to be casual, too controlled to be ordinary. The small manila envelope in her hand crinkled faintly, a sound that seemed far louder than it should have been in the heavy stillness of the formation. Every eye followed her, every whisper burned. Staff Sergeant Dylan Reeves spotted her first. His jaw tensed, the lines of disapproval already carved deep into his face. He leaned toward Lance Corporal Tasha Kendrick, and whatever he whispered made her smirk. A ripple of awareness moved through the rows of Marines like a current through water. It always happened when she showed up. Kira kept her eyes fixed ahead, not at them, not at anyone, just at Captain Hayes, the only officer who still looked at her without open disdain. He stood waiting at the front, arms crossed, face unreadable. When she reached him, she handed him the envelope wordlessly. The familiar paper rustled as he opened it. Medical authorization forms, again. His eyes scanned the contents, modified PT clearance. The same words that had been printed and reprinted over the last 6 months. The silence was thick until Hayes finally spoke. Marines, Corporal Brennan will be conducting modified PT this morning under medical advisement. She will report to the gym for individual training. The words landed like an accusation. Behind her, someone exhaled sharply, half laugh, half curse. Kira didn't turn. She had stopped turning months ago. There was nothing left to see except the judgment in their eyes. Staff Sergeant Reeves stepped forward, his voice carrying authority that bordered on challenge. "Sir, with respect, this is the 3rd time this month. We've got combat readiness evaluations coming up. We need every Marine at full capacity." Captain Hayes didn't flinch. The medical officer approved the modification. Corporal Brennan will complete her assigned training per the directive. Reeves nodded, slow and deliberate. But his eyes cut toward Kira and the message was unmistakable. "You're dead weight." She didn't move, didn't react. She'd been trained to keep her face still under worse circumstances. Interrogation lights, the pressure of silence, the weight of expectation. This was nothing. This was child's play compared to what she'd endured before. Still, the isolation hurt more than any mission wound ever could. "Fall out," Captain Hayes ordered, and the formation broke into motion. The platoon began their run, their synchronized cadence echoing across the base, boots thudding in rhythm, laughter trailing behind them. Kira stood alone as their formation disappeared into the morning haze. The parade deck was empty now, except for her. She turned toward the gym, the envelope still in her hand. The sun was climbing higher, dissolving the last traces of fog from the California hills. Somewhere beyond those hills, she had run 40 miles 3 days ago under a different name, for a mission that didn't exist. But here, she was just Corporal Brennan, the weak one with medical limitations. The gym was empty, as expected. She liked it that way. The smell of rubber mats, cold metal, and faint disinfectant greeted her. Familiar, grounding. She dropped her pack, unrolled her training mat, and pulled out 2 logs, one fake, for show, and one real, encrypted, hidden beneath a false cover sheet. Her shoulders ached faintly from the debrief that had kept her awake until 300. The mark on her left shoulder blade, a coiled serpent etched in black ink, seemed to burn beneath her uniform, not from pain, but memory. The mark wasn't decoration, it was an oath. And every time someone called her weak, that oath demanded silence. She started her workout. Slow, deliberate movements, controlled breathing, push-ups that transitioned into explosive plyometric jumps, core drills that could break an average Marine in under a minute. Every motion calculated to look believable, hard enough to pass as modified, easy enough to conceal what she was really capable of. Her body wanted to go faster, to move the way it had been trained to, fluid, deadly, perfect. But this wasn't about strength. This was about cover. The door creaked open behind her. She didn't turn immediately, just shifted her awareness, subtle and sharp. The footfalls were light, quick, female. Tasha Kendrick. Must be nice, Tasha said, sarcasm dripping like acid. Get to sleep in and train while the rest of us are out there sweating for real. Kira completed her set before answering. I'm completing my assigned training, Lance Corporal. Right, Tasha laughed without humor. Special training. You know what everyone thinks, right? That you're faking it, gaming the system, hiding behind paperwork. Kira stood slowly, breathing steady. She met Tasha's eyes. What they think doesn't change my orders. You're weak, Tasha said flatly. And when we deploy, you're going to get someone killed. That blood'll be on your hands. The words hit harder than Tasha could imagine, not because they were true, but because Kira had already seen blood there. Too much of it. Some she'd spilled, some she'd saved. When the door closed, the silence came roaring back. Kira looked at her hands, steady, unmarked, ordinary to anyone else. Hands that had held weapons that didn't officially exist. Hands that had pulled teammates out of fire zones no one would ever acknowledge. She exhaled slowly and returned to her set. The rhythm steadied her. Repetition, focus, control. Outside, the rest of her unit was running, loud, visible, unified. Inside, she was training alone for missions none of them would ever hear about. The space between those two worlds, public and classified, felt wider than any battlefield. Later that afternoon, the briefing room buzzed with idle chatter as the Marines assembled, the kind of low, rolling noise that always dimmed when she entered. Kira took her usual seat in the back corner. No one stopped talking, but every conversation shifted tone. Voices dropped, eyes flickered her way, then quickly away. Staff Sergeant Reeves stood at the front, arranging papers with unnecessary force. When he looked up and caught her gaze, he didn't blink. Neither did she. It was a small act of defiance, but sometimes small was enough. Captain Hayes entered. At ease, the murmurs died. He stepped up beside Reeves, expression calm but serious. As you all know, Colonel Marcus Ashford will be visiting next week for a comprehensive readiness inspection. A few groans rippled through the room. Inspections meant stress. No one liked them. Kira didn't groan, she just sat still. Inside, though, a ripple of unease ran through her. Ashford. The name wasn't unfamiliar. High clearance, deep connections, the kind of officer who didn't just walk in blind. Her extraction had been scheduled for the same week. Now that would have to wait. Hayes continued. All personnel will be present and accounted for. Full dress uniforms, updated files, no exceptions. His eyes flicked to the back of the room, to her. Kira kept her expression neutral, but the message was clear. You're not invisible this time. When the meeting ended, she tried to slip out quietly. Reeves intercepted her before she reached the door. Corporal Brennan. His voice was low, controlled, dangerous. When the colonel comes, there'll be no excuses, no medical paperwork. You'll stand in formation like everyone else. I'll follow all lawful orders, Staff Sergeant. He leaned closer, his words a whisper edged with venom. You're a disgrace to the uniform. She didn't flinch, didn't respond. If he knew half of what that uniform had seen, what she had done wearing it, he'd fall silent out of shame, not anger. But she couldn't tell him that. She couldn't tell anyone. Later that night in her room, the encrypted phone on her desk buzzed. A single message. Delay unavoidable. Maintain cover at all costs. Colonel inspection cannot be avoided. Proceed as planned. She typed back, understood, standing by. Seconds later, another message appeared. Colonel Ashford has proper clearance. If situation becomes critical, he may be briefed, only as last resort. Kira set the phone down and stared at her reflection in the small mirror on the wall. A young woman looked back, unremarkable, plain, another face in the Corps. No one would suspect that same woman had once operated behind enemy lines under radio silence for 72 hours, guiding air support that saved a dozen lives. She touched her shoulder lightly through the fabric, feeling the faint outline of the serpent mark beneath. That mark had cost her everything: anonymity, peace, a name that could exist in daylight. And now it was about to cost her again. A knock sounded on the door. "Enter," she said. Gunnery Sergeant Torres stepped in. Older, steadier, with the quiet kind of authority born from years of real combat. "Corporal," he said, "got a minute?" She nodded. "I don't know what your story is," Torres began, "and it's not my business. But I've seen Marines like you before: clean files, vague medicals, movement that says experience, not training. Something doesn't add up." Kira stayed silent. Torres continued, "Reeves is building a case, and he's good at paperwork warfare. If you've got any way to clear this up before the colonel arrives, now's the time." "I'll handle it, Gunny," she said quietly, "within orders." He studied her for a long moment. "You know, I don't think you're weak. I think you're carrying something heavy. Alone, that's a different kind of strength." When he left, she sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at her hands again. "That blood will be on your hands," Tasha had said. If only she knew. The base outside was alive with sound, laughter, music, routine. Inside her room, Kira sat in silence, preparing, waiting. Colonel Ashford was coming, and the secret she'd carried for years, the serpent mark she had sworn to hide, was about to be tested under daylight. She didn't know yet whether it would destroy her cover or save her soul. But she knew one thing for certain. When that moment came, she would face it standing tall. Because that's what the mark demanded. Why did the air feel heavier that morning? It wasn't the California fog or the routine inspection chatter rolling across Camp Pendleton's barracks. It was something else: the weight of anticipation. The week ahead would bring the arrival of Colonel Marcus Ashford, and though his visit was officially a routine readiness inspection, Kira Brennan knew better. Routine didn't exist in her world, not really. She walked across the parade deck, boots striking the concrete in precise rhythm. Around her, squads assembled for drills, voices overlapping, orders, laughter, the dull thud of rifles slung in practiced motions. Everyone belonged. Everyone except her. "Corporal Brennan." The voice snapped through the morning air, firm, controlled, and full of quiet disapproval. Staff Sergeant Reeves stood near the formation, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The look in his eyes told her everything she already knew. He didn't trust her. He never had. Kira stopped, meeting his gaze without a word. Reeves held a clipboard, but his posture said this wasn't about paperwork. "Captain Hayes wants you in the briefing room. Now." A few Marines turned their heads, curious, pretending not to watch. Kira felt their stares like heat on her back as she walked toward the administrative wing. Every whisper trailed behind her: malingerer, faker, problem child. None of them knew how far from the truth that was. Inside, the briefing room buzzed with low conversation. Maps lined the walls. The faint hum of projectors filled the space. She entered quietly, slipping into a back seat. No one greeted her. They rarely did. When Captain Hayes walked in, the room snapped to attention. "At ease," he said, voice calm but edged. "You all know why we're here. Colonel Ashford arrives in 7 days. That means full readiness. No excuses, no delays." The word excuses lingered like smoke. Kira's jaw tightened. She kept her eyes on the table, pretending not to notice the subtle glances cast her way. Each one a reminder that her medical exemption was still the whispered story of the unit. Captain Hayes continued, "Uniform inspections, updated files, medical records reviewed. I expect this company to present itself as the best this battalion has to offer." He scanned the room. his eyes stopping briefly on her, not harshly but pointedly. Kira felt her pulse pick up. The colonel's inspection wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. Her mission handler had warned her weeks ago that any unnecessary scrutiny could jeopardize cover operations. But now, with a full colonel arriving, she'd have no choice but to play her role to perfection. The meeting broke. Marines clustered in small groups, muttering about checklists and drill schedules. As Kira stood to leave, Reeves stepped into her path. "Let me make something clear," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "When the colonel gets here, you're standing in formation like the rest of us. No medical slips, no special treatment, understood?" Kira held his gaze, calm, measured. "I follow all lawful orders, Staff Sergeant." Reeves' lips curved into something close to a smile, though there was no warmth in it. "You hide behind paperwork, Corporal, but paperwork won't save you forever." He turned and walked away. The smell of coffee and sweat lingered in the air as the door closed behind him. Kira exhaled slowly. Her fingers brushed the fabric of her uniform sleeve, feeling the faint heat beneath it, the serpent mark on her shoulder blade, invisible yet burning, a reminder of the oath she'd taken and the ghosts that followed her everywhere. That night her barracks room felt smaller than usual. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. She sat at the edge of her bunk, staring at her encrypted phone, its small screen glowing faintly in the dark. A message flashed. "Delay unavoidable. Maintain cover at all costs. Inspection cannot be avoided. Proceed as planned." She typed back quickly, fingers steady despite the storm in her chest. "Understood, standing by for further instruction." Another message came almost instantly. "Colonel Ashford has proper clearance. If necessary, he can be briefed, last resort only. Cover remains top priority." Kira leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. Trust his judgment, the message implied. But trust was a luxury she'd learned to live without. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Gunnery Sergeant Torres, the quiet veteran who always seemed to know more than he said. His tone was steady, neither friendly nor hostile. "Got a minute?" She nodded, stepping aside. He glanced around her room, neat, bare, regulation perfect. The kind of room belonging to someone who didn't plan to stay long. "I'll be direct," he said. "I don't know what your story is, and I don't need to, but something doesn't add up. You move like someone who's seen more than you're saying, and I've been in this corps long enough to recognize when someone's been through the fire." Kira said nothing. Silence was part of her uniform now. Torres sighed. "Reeves is pushing hard. He's convinced you're faking it. When the colonel arrives, he's going to make his move. I don't know if you can stop that, but I wanted you to know it's coming." For a moment the mask slipped just a little. Gratitude flickered behind her eyes. "Thank you, Gunny." He nodded. "I don't think you're a coward. I think you're carrying something heavy and you're doing it alone. That's a different kind of strength." When he left, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Kira sat on her bunk again, staring down at her hands. Hands that had saved lives in places that didn't exist. Hands that had done things no one in this barracks could ever imagine. Outside, laughter drifted through the windows. Easy, human laughter from Marines who didn't know what it meant to live with ghosts. The days that followed blurred together, a cycle of cold mornings, tense briefings, and the sharp rhythm of boots on concrete. Each sunrise brought the colonel closer. Each day, the tension thickened. By Tuesday, even the air in the gym felt charged. When Kira pushed through the door for her solo PT session, 3 Marines were already there. Vance, Lou, Mendoza, Reeves' people. They paused their workout as she entered. The looks they exchanged weren't casual. "Must be nice," Vance said loudly, wiping sweat from his brow. "Sleeping in while the rest of us actually earn our stripes." Kira said nothing. She set her bag down, removed her jacket, and began her warm-up. Controlled, focused, measured breathing. Lou laughed, short, sharp, ugly. That's the famous modified PT. Guess the paperwork really does all the heavy lifting. She ignored them. Her focus narrowed to the rhythm of her breath, the burn in her muscles, the feel of the floor beneath her palms. Then Vance stepped closer. You're not fooling anyone, Brennan. You're scared. You know you can't hack it. Kira stopped mid-rep, rising slowly. Her calmness unnerved him. You should focus on your own training, Corporal. His eyes flared. Don't tell me what to focus on. He took a step forward, his voice dropping. You freeze up out there, someone dies. Remember that. The door opened. Captain Hayes stepped in, the air in the room shifting instantly. Everything all right here? Yes, sir, Kira replied, voice level. Just completing my assigned training. The captain's gaze swept the room. Good, then let's keep it professional, all of you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Hayes held Kira's eyes for a moment, apology flickering behind his composed demeanor, then turned and left. The three Marines went quiet, not from guilt but from fear of being seen. When the door closed again, Kira resumed her exercises. Calm, controlled, but inside her pulse pounded. This wasn't just resentment anymore, it was hostility with intent. That afternoon, the summons came. She entered the company office to find Reeves waiting behind a desk, a thick folder open in front of him. Captain Hayes stood by the window, arms crossed. Sit down, Corporal. Kira obeyed, posture perfect. Reeves flipped through the pages with theatrical care. I've been tracking your performance for 6 months. Missed formations, modified training, incomplete participation. It's a clear pattern. Captain Hayes shifted, silent but tense. He couldn't defend her without risking exposure. Kira understood that. Reeves continued, I'm recommending a full fitness evaluation during the Colonel's inspection. No exemptions, no medical excuses, just you performing like everyone else. He smiled thinly. Unless, of course, there's something you're hiding. The trap had been set. A full evaluation meant exposure. Her physical condition was beyond standard Marine metrics, faster, stronger, sharper. One slip and they'd know she wasn't what she claimed to be. But refusing would only confirm Reeves' accusations. Kira met his gaze evenly. I will comply with any lawful order, Staff Sergeant. Reeves leaned back, satisfied. Good, then I'll make sure the Colonel knows to expect it. She was dismissed. Walking back across the base, Kira felt the walls closing in. Every glance from every Marine carried an unspoken judgment. Every laugh felt aimed in her direction. That night she ran. Up through the hills beyond the base, where the stars burned sharp against the Pacific haze. She ran until her lungs burned and her body screamed for mercy. 40 miles, no rest, no music, no distraction, just the rhythm of her heartbeat and the weight of the serpent mark beneath her skin. Pain was her prayer. Silence her confession. By the time she reached the ridge, the base lights below looked like constellations, bright, distant, unreachable. She stared down at them and whispered to the wind, You have no idea who I am. The wind didn't answer, but something inside her did, that quiet, unyielding voice that had carried her through every impossible mission. You don't need them to. As dawn painted the sky in pale gold, Kira descended the trail. The inspection was only days away. Reeves was waiting. The Colonel was coming. And when he arrived, she would either be exposed or finally, quietly understood. Why did the air feel so still? The morning the Colonel arrived, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The base was spotless, uniforms razor-creased, flags snapping in the dry California breeze, boots gleaming like mirrors. Every Marine moved with the brittle precision of soldiers who knew someone was watching. And someone was. Colonel Marcus Ashford stepped out of a black sedan that rolled to a perfect stop beside the parade deck. His presence seemed to bend the air. He wasn't a man who needed to raise his voice. The quiet around him did the talking. From the back rank, Corporal Kira Brennan stood at attention, eyes fixed straight ahead. Beneath her dress blues, her heart beat steady, not calm, not panicked, just controlled. Control was her armor. Ashford walked the line, his footsteps crisp on the concrete. His eyes were sharp and deliberate, assessing each Marine with the calm precision of someone who'd seen every kind of battlefield, every kind of lie. And then his gaze fell on her. For a moment, time fractured. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, a recognition that sliced through her like a whisper. Then it was gone. "Name and rank." "Corporal Kira Brennan, sir." His tone was neutral. "How long have you been assigned to this unit?" "6 months, sir." He nodded slowly, gaze dropping not to her ribbons or her boots, but to the left shoulder of her uniform, the exact spot beneath which, unseen by anyone here, the serpent mark lay inked into her skin. Something in his posture changed, barely noticeable, but Kira saw it, she felt it. "Carry on," he said softly. As he moved on, Staff Sergeant Reeves followed him like a shadow, clutching a folder thick with papers, 6 months of accusations, reports, and carefully documented contempt. When they reached the far end of the line, Reeves spoke just loud enough for others to hear. "Sir, if I may, I've compiled documentation regarding Corporal Brennan's repeated exemptions and substandard participation. I recommend she be evaluated personally during your inspection." The colonel paused, glancing at the folder. Kira didn't move. She could feel the entire formation's attention pivot in her direction like the turning of a gun turret. Ashford took the file without expression, flipping through its pages. His face gave away nothing. Then quietly, understood. He turned, his voice crisp. "Captain Hayes, Corporal Brennan, my office, 15 minutes." The order hit like a ripple through water. Even Reeves blinked, unsure what it meant. As the formation dispersed, whispers rose. Speculation, curiosity, unease. Kira's stomach was steel. She'd faced interrogation in windowless rooms, firefights under collapsing ceilings. But somehow this, walking toward a meeting where her identity might unravel, felt heavier than all of it. When she entered the colonel's temporary office, he was standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out toward the hills. Captain Hayes was already there, tense, uncertain. "Close the door," Ashford said. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt final. He turned slowly to face them. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those gray, battle-scarred eyes, told a story of someone who had already guessed the truth. "Captain," he began, "how much do you actually know about Corporal Brennan's assignment?" Hayes hesitated. "Sir, I was informed her orders came from higher authority. I was instructed to maintain her cover and authorize all medical modifications. Beyond that, I was deliberately kept out of the loop." The colonel nodded once as if that confirmed something. He looked at Kira. "Remove your jacket." "Sir," Hayes started, alarmed. Ashford's tone left no room for argument. "Now, Corporal." Kira's hands didn't tremble. She unbuttoned her jacket with mechanical precision and folded it neatly over her arm. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air vent. The colonel stepped closer. He reached gently to her collar, lowering the fabric just enough to expose the upper curve of the serpent tattoo etched into her shoulder blade, black ink against pale skin, a mark that had no official record but carried the weight of 1,000 ghosts. He drew a slow breath. "Dear God." Captain Hayes froze. His eyes widened as he saw the faint shape, realizing what it meant, though not everything it meant. Ashford's voice softened. "How long have you been carrying this alone?" 6 months, sir," Kira said quietly. "This cover was assigned after my last mission." The colonel turned to the window again, jaw tightening. 17 operations, he murmured, more to himself than to them, and 0 failures. Hayes blinked. 17. Kira stood motionless, expression neutral. Yes, sir. For a long time, no one spoke. The weight of it filled the room like smoke, invisible, inescapable. Finally, Ashford turned. That mark is supposed to be invisible outside black-level channels. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. He faced Hayes. Captain, understand this. Operators with that insignia exist in the shadows between national policy and necessity. They answer to command chains above ours. The attrition rate for the Serpent program is 92%. The ones who survive don't exactly come back whole. Hayes swallowed hard, the reality sinking in. Then all this, the medical slips, the isolation, its cover for operational rotation. Exactly, the colonel said. Every exemption she's filed was authorized by clearance you'll never see. Kira spoke softly. Sir, my cover cannot be compromised. If this goes beyond you, it jeopardizes ongoing operations. I know. The colonel's voice was low, heavy. But your situation here, it's not sustainable. Reeves has built a case. Half your unit believes you're a fraud. If I shut him down without explanation, I destroy his credibility and morale across the company. So what's the alternative? Hayes asked. Ashford looked between them. We show them just enough truth to silence the rumors, but not enough to expose what she is. He turned to Kira. Tomorrow morning before formation, you'll undergo the evaluation Reeves requested. I'll conduct it personally. You'll perform above standard but not impossibly, enough to earn their respect, not their suspicion. Kira met his eyes, calm but alert. Understood, sir. I can modulate performance as required. The colonel studied her for a moment, something like admiration flickering beneath the authority. You've been carrying this burden longer than most men could stand. You've done your duty. Now let me do mine. He handed her jacket back. You're dismissed, Corporal. Get some rest. Tomorrow you show them what strength looks like when it doesn't need to shout. As Kira stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, the world seemed painfully normal. Marines laughing in the distance, the rumble of trucks, the rhythm of life that would never know what had just been spoken behind that locked door. Captain Hayes caught up to her halfway across the deck. His voice was quiet. 17 missions. You're 26. She didn't look at him. Age doesn't matter, sir, only results. He hesitated, searching for words, then said softly, You shouldn't have had to face this alone. Kira almost smiled, not with amusement but with understanding. Alone is part of the job. That night the barracks felt different. The noise of evening routine faded into a distant hum. She sat by the window, moonlight washing across her desk. Her encrypted phone was silent for once, no new orders, no coded messages. For a fleeting second, she wondered what it would feel like to belong, truly belong, in the unit she'd been assigned to protect from afar. To laugh in the mess hall, to train without lies to be seen. But that wasn't her life. Her life was built on silence, shadows, and sacrifice. She glanced down at the faint outline of the serpent beneath her skin. Its shape caught the light like a scar that refused to fade. Tomorrow, she would have to walk the line between truth and secrecy, between the soldier they saw and the ghost she really was. And when she stepped onto that field at dawn, they would finally see a glimpse, just a glimpse of the strength they had mocked for so long. The kind that didn't roar or demand recognition. The kind that survived quietly. The kind that remembered every face it saved, and everyone it couldn't. Why did the dawn feel heavier than usual? Because this morning the truth was coming, not the full truth, just the part that could survive daylight. 400 hours. The barracks were quiet. Only the hum of distant generators and the low murmur of waves beyond Camp Pendleton's hills broke the silence. Corporal Kira Brennan sat on the edge of her bunk, tying her boots. Her movements were slow, deliberate, ritualistic. The room was dim, the light from her desk lamp catching the faint scar above her wrist, a reminder of a mission that didn't exist. Her breathing was calm, her thoughts weren't. Today wasn't combat, it wasn't survival, but it felt like both. She'd been trained to disappear into shadows, to blend into enemy cities, to operate under names that never touched paperwork. But here, under the clean morning light of her own base, she felt more exposed than she ever had in hostile territory. She stood, straightened her PT uniform, and whispered to the empty room, "Control the narrative, control the outcome." At 5:30, the horizon turned silver. She walked toward the obstacle field where Colonel Ashford, Captain Hayes, and Staff Sergeant Reeves waited. Three figures, three different versions of judgment. Reeves stood with arms folded, posture rigid, face unreadable but proud. He'd built this moment after all. This was his chance to prove her unfit. Captain Hayes lingered beside the colonel, the weight of command pressing on his shoulders. He looked tired not from lack of sleep, but from carrying secrets that weren't his to bear. And Colonel Ashford, composed, steady, stood like a man who had already made peace with what he would see. "Morning, Corporal," he said. "Morning, sir." His voice carried command, not comfort. "We'll conduct a fair and complete evaluation. You will perform to the best of your ability. No modifications, no excuses." "Yes, sir." Reeves smirked faintly, finally. Ashford ignored the comment. "Obstacle course first, then range, then close quarters demonstration. Begin when ready." Kira nodded once. She moved to the start line, closed her eyes for a heartbeat, and let the noise fade. Every inhale slowed time. Every exhale sharpened focus. The colonel's voice cut through the still air. "Begin." She exploded forward. The first obstacle was the rope climb, 30 feet of thick hemp rising into the pale morning. Her hands gripped the rope, muscles flexed, movement fluid. She made herself pause halfway, deliberately slowing, pretending fatigue where none existed. Then, hand over hand, she finished in 45 seconds. A strong time, not extraordinary. Reeves scribbled something on his clipboard. Next, the wall traverse. Wooden holds across a horizontal span, balance and control. Her body moved instinctively, perfectly aware of weight and momentum. But she forced small hesitations, a foot slip here, a breath there. She reached the end with precision that felt human, not superhuman. Then came the tire run, 30 rubber circles laid in staggered pattern. Her feet danced across them, rhythmic, light. For the first time, she let herself move almost freely. The colonel's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in recognition. He'd seen movement like that before. Controlled chaos, years of training distilled into instinct. The low crawl under barbed wire came next. She slid beneath the sharp metal, uniform catching dirt, arms and legs working in mechanical efficiency. She made sure to emerge winded, chest rising and falling in believable exhaustion. The final climb, a 15-foot wall. Her fingers caught the top edge. She pulled herself up, swinging her leg over with controlled effort. When her boots hit the ground again, the stopwatch clicked. "Time?" Hayes asked. 7 minutes, 42 seconds, the colonel replied. Reeves frowned. "Acceptable, sir, but nothing impressive." "Acceptable is what I asked for," Ashford said evenly. They moved to the range. The sun was just cresting over the hills, turning the world gold. The shooting range stretched ahead, targets at 100, 200, 300 meters. Ashford handed her an M4. Standard qualification drill, 10 rounds per target. Kira took the rifle, the familiar weight anchoring her. She inhaled, exhaled, and let her mind fall into that cold, focused space she'd lived in for years. At 100 meters, she fired, 8 clean hits in the center mass, 2 wide. At 200, she adjusted deliberately off-center, missing once. At 300, she aimed, calculated, then let one shot drift enough to seem human. When the last shell casing hit the concrete, the smell of gunpowder hung in the air. "Scores?" Hayes asked. Ashford lowered his binoculars. "Above average, not perfect." "Good," Reeves said flatly. "Now, let's see how she handles real pressure." Ashford glanced at him. "You have something in mind, Staff Sergeant?" "Yes, sir. Hand-to-hand, controlled demonstration, combat stress test." The colonel's eyes flicked toward Kira. A silent conversation passed between them. His approval was in the smallest of nods. "Very well," he said. "You'll be her opponent." Reeves blinked, caught off guard, then smiled. "Gladly, sir." The training mat was set. The ground smelled faintly of sweat and dust. Reeves rolled his shoulders, confident. He outweighed her by 40 pounds, all muscle and pride. Ashford's tone turned steel. "Controlled engagement. No strikes to the throat, eyes, or joints. End on my command." He looked between them. "Begin." Reeves attacked fast, a blunt force rush testing her, trying to overwhelm. Kira parried, redirecting his weight, not striking back. She made herself defensive, just enough movement to survive, not dominate. Reeves pressed harder, growing frustrated. He feinted, grabbed for her arm, and she let him. The illusion of advantage. Then in a heartbeat she shifted. A pivot, a sweep, a leverage point only she could see. Reeves hit the mat before he understood what had happened, disarmed. Immobilized, face down, her knee pressed between his shoulder blades. Ashford's voice cut the silence. "Stop." Kira released immediately, stepping back into attention. Reeves lay there a moment longer, stunned. Then he pushed himself up, eyes burning, not with anger but with disbelief. He'd underestimated her. The colonel's expression remained neutral, but Hayes caught the faintest trace of approval in his eyes. Reeves cleared his throat. "Sir, her technique is unconventional but effective." Ashford nodded. "Your assessment?" "Better than expected," Reeves said reluctantly. "More than adequate for her duties." Ashford turned his gaze toward Kira. "Corporal Brennan, you've demonstrated sufficient physical capability and combat readiness. The medical modifications to your routine are hereby upheld as authorized." His tone shifted, colder, commanding. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, you will convey this finding to the unit. No further questions about Corporal Brennan's fitness will be entertained. Am I clear?" Reeves straightened. "Crystal clear, sir." "Good." Dismissed. Hayes and Reeves left together. Kira stood still, heart finally slowing, breath steadying. The colonel walked toward her, folding his clipboard under one arm. His expression softened. "That was well done, Corporal. Controlled, realistic. You walked the line perfectly." Kira allowed herself a quiet breath. "Harder than a mission, sir." "I know." His eyes held the kind of understanding only shared between those who have carried secrets too long. The restraint it takes to hold back, that's a different kind of discipline. She nodded. "Yes, sir." Ashford looked out across the now empty field. "They'll talk, you know, they'll speculate, but the tone will change. Fear will turn to respect, even if it takes time." "Respect isn't what I'm after." "I know," he said quietly. "But sometimes respect is the closest thing to peace you'll get in this line of work." For a long moment, they stood in silence, two soldiers bound by truths that could never be spoken aloud. Finally, he glanced at his watch. "Get cleaned up, Corporal, and remember you're not as invisible as you think." She saluted. "Yes, sir." As he walked away, the morning sun flared behind him, blinding for a second, a halo of authority and consequence. Kira turned toward the hills, breathing in the cold ocean wind. Her hands still trembled faintly from the effort of holding back. Her muscles burned from self-restraint more than exertion. But she'd done it. She walked the line. Proved enough, revealed nothing. Somewhere deep inside, the serpent mark burned warm against her skin, not as a wound but as a promise. She whispered under her breath, a phrase her first instructor had drilled into her years ago, back in the hidden corridors of training compounds that didn't officially exist. True power is knowing when not to show it. And as the echo faded into the wind, Kira Brennan walked off the field, a soldier still doubted by most, but no longer underestimated. Tomorrow the whispers would change. Tomorrow she'd still be the same, silent, steady, and unseen. Because the Serpent never needed validation. It just waited for the moment it was truly required. Why do people only respect what they fear? The question lingered in Kira's mind as the morning after the evaluation unfolded like the calm after a storm. No one said anything at first. The silence was louder than words, the kind that follows a collective reckoning. In the chow hall, conversations paused when she entered. Forks clinked against metal trays, heads bent lower over breakfast. A few eyes followed her, cautious, measuring, maybe even ashamed. She walked past them, tray in hand, not slowing, not looking up. She didn't need their apologies. She'd already learned that respect earned through humiliation was hollow. Still, something had shifted. At her usual corner table, she sat alone, eating in quiet rhythm. Across the room, Staff Sergeant Reeves entered, his posture tighter than usual, his jaw clenched. The noise of the hall dimmed. He hesitated, just long enough for everyone to notice, before walking straight to her table. Kira didn't look up until his shadow fell across her tray. "Corporal," he said, his tone clipped but calm. "A word." She rose slowly, following him outside into the bright morning. The air smelled of ocean salt and dust. Reeves stopped near the bleachers beside the PT field. For a moment he said nothing, just stood there, hands on his hips, staring at the horizon. Finally he exhaled. "I don't know what kind of game you and the colonel are playing, but yesterday—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Yesterday, you made me look like a fool." Kira's expression didn't change. "That wasn't my intent, Staff Sergeant." He laughed once, short, bitter. "Intent doesn't matter, perception does. You've changed it. I don't know how, but you did." She met his gaze, calm and steady. "Maybe you just saw what you didn't want to see." Reeves studied her for a moment, then looked away. "You're good, Brennan. Too good for your record to make sense. I still don't know who signed your exemptions or why, but—" He stopped. Something in his voice softened, just slightly. "I misjudged you, that's all I'll say." Kira didn't smile, she just nodded. "Acknowledged, Staff Sergeant." He nodded back, eyes unreadable. "Just keep your head down. You've got the colonel's protection now, but that won't last forever." When he walked away, Kira stood in silence, feeling the wind brush her face. Not relief, not victory, just quiet acknowledgement that she'd survived another kind of battlefield. That afternoon, Captain Hayes called her into his office. His desk was cluttered with reports, his uniform crisp as always, but his eyes were softer than before. "Sit, Corporal." She did. He leaned forward. "The colonel spoke highly of your composure, said you showed restraint and professionalism. That's not a compliment he gives lightly." Kira said nothing. Praise meant little when it came from necessity. Hayes tapped a pen against the desk. "You've earned some breathing room, but you need to understand this unit's culture doesn't change overnight. Some of them will still whisper. Some of them won't stop until you outrank them." "I'm not here for approval, sir." "I know," he said quietly, "but you still have to live here, eat here, train here. There's a difference between surviving in silence and living with it." She looked at him, eyes tired but focused. "Sir, silence is the only thing that's ever kept me alive." He didn't argue, he just nodded, slow, deliberate. "Then maybe one day you'll find a reason to break it." When she left the office, the sun was lowering behind the hangars, throwing long shadows across the base. Marines jogged by, laughter echoing faintly, the sound oddly distant. Kira walked toward the range, alone as usual. There was comfort in repetition, chambering rounds, adjusting sights, breathing between shots. Each sound, the metallic click, the sharp recoil, the faint echo, was a language she understood better than conversation. Halfway through her second magazine, she realized she wasn't alone. "Nice grouping," said a quiet voice behind her. She turned. Gunnery Sergeant Torres stood there, hands in pockets, eyes half smiling. He gestured to the target. "You could have cleaned up in the evaluation, but you held back. Smart move." Kira looked back toward the range. "Wasn't about showing off." "Didn't think it was," Torres said. "Still, not many could have done what you did and made it look that ordinary." There was no accusation in his tone, just understanding. He stepped closer, voice lowering. "The colonel's a sharp man. He's seen ghosts before. You might not have said a word, but he knew. And that mark on your shoulder, he recognized it. I saw his eyes." Kira froze, but only for a moment. "Then you know what that means." Torres nodded slowly. "It means you've been through more than anyone here can imagine, and you're still standing. That's enough." He started to leave, then stopped. "You ever need someone to talk to who won't ask too many questions, you know where to find me." She gave a small nod. "Appreciate it, Gunny." When he left, Kira turned back to the range and raised her weapon again. This time, she didn't hold back. 10 shots, 10 hits, center mass, each one faster than the last. The recoil rhythm felt like breathing, steady, alive, real. The next morning, something strange happened. During formation, when Reeves called her name, his voice didn't carry its usual edge. Just a flat tone, neutral, professional. "Corporal Brennan present." She answered calmly, "Here, Staff Sergeant." That was it, no tension, no mockery. Even stranger, when the squad broke for drills, Vance, the same Marine who'd mocked her weeks earlier, hesitated before passing by. He muttered, "Nice work yesterday, Brennan," barely loud enough to hear. She didn't respond, but for the first time in months the sound didn't sting. Later that day, while cleaning her rifle on the bench outside the armory, she caught a reflection in the metal herself. Eyes harder than before, face tired but still composed, the faintest trace of a scar beneath her collarbone. She didn't look like someone who needed redemption. She looked like someone who'd already paid for it. As the sun began to set, she walked toward the cliffs overlooking the ocean, her private ritual after long days. The Pacific stretched endlessly below, waves colliding against the rocks in rhythm with her thoughts. Every mission she'd ever taken had been about control, controlling outcomes, chaos, lives. But here, there was nothing to control, only the slow surrender of the sea against the shore. She closed her eyes. The wind caught her hair, salt brushing her lips. Maybe Captain Hayes was right. Maybe silence wasn't living, it was surviving. But survival was what she knew best. And yet, a small part of her, the human part buried under discipline and protocol, wondered if she still had the right to want more than that. In the distance, the base loudspeaker called final formation. She turned and started walking back, each step slow, measured, certain. The whispers behind her were fading. The fear was shifting into respect. And though none of them knew who she truly was, it didn't matter. Because dignity doesn't demand explanation. It simply walks forward, steady, unshaken, unseen. Would you like me to continue with Part 6, where an unexpected external threat, a real security breach or sudden alert, puts the base and Kira's cover to the test, forcing her to act without revealing who she is? You said. Zix. ChatGPT said. Here's Part 6 of your cinematic military story, following directly after Part 5, when quiet respect begins to settle around Kira Brennan. But peace, as always, never lasts long. This part escalates the tension with a sudden external threat, testing her instincts, control, and the fragile trust she's begun to earn. Why do calm days always feel like the prelude to something breaking? The base was unusually still that morning, the kind of stillness that made even the seagulls sound cautious. The horizon was clean, the ocean glinting under a pale blue sky. Everything looked ordinary. But Kira Brennan had learned long ago that ordinary was the camouflage chaos liked best. She was finishing a maintenance check on her rifle when the first alarm went off. A low, rising wail that cut through the morning air like a blade. Every Marine froze. Then the loudspeakers blared sharp, urgent. Base security alert. Unauthorized perimeter breach, Sector Delta. All personnel to assigned lockdown or rapid response positions. Kira's head snapped up. Sector Delta was 2 miles west, the old storage grid near the cliffs. Remote, poorly monitored, rarely visited, which made it the perfect place for trouble. Within seconds the base transformed. Doors slammed. Boots thundered on concrete. Orders barked across the comms. The noise of readiness, mechanical, efficient, panic beneath the surface. Kira grabbed her gear and ran. Captain Hayes's voice came through the local comm channel. All units were securing the perimeter. This isn't a drill. Repeat, not a drill. Her pulse steadied. Her training kicked in. Every sound became data. Every heartbeat a clock. She joined a 4 Marine response squad moving toward the west gate. Tors, Vance, Lou, and a young private named Henderson, whose hands shook slightly as he adjusted his rifle sling. Tors glanced at Kira as they jogged. Stay sharp. Intel says possible infiltration, small group, maybe 2 or 3, unknown intent. Kira nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. Unknown intent. That phrase covered a lot of sins. They reached the first checkpoint. Dust blew in slow spirals around the security fence, sunlight flashing off the distant sea. The silence beyond the chain link was unnatural. Vance exhaled. Doesn't make sense. Who'd hit a training base? Kira didn't answer. She was already moving, slow, deliberate, eyes tracing footprints in the dirt near the outer wall. Heavy tread, civilian boots, 2 pairs, maybe 3. Movement, she said softly, pointing toward a line of storage containers. Tors motioned to his team. Flank left and right, keep it tight. They advanced, weapons raised, the metallic clack of safeties echoing in rhythm. As they neared the containers, a figure darted from cover, fast, low, professional. Not some lost civilian or reckless trespasser. This was trained movement. Gunfire cracked. Tors dove for cover, shouting, "Contact front." The squad scattered, returning fire in controlled bursts. Henderson froze, fear locking him mid-step. Kira grabbed his vest, pulling him behind a stack of crates just as a round tore through where he'd been standing. "Stay down," she ordered, voice calm, eyes scanning. He nodded, breathing fast. 2 more shots, close, too close. Kira peeked out just long enough to count muzzle flashes. 2 shooters, maybe one providing cover while the other repositioned. Military-grade discipline. Something about their angles didn't feel random. They weren't shooting to kill. They were probing, testing response time. Tors shouted over the comm, "Alpha Squad, we've got unknown hostiles, military trained. Requesting air recon and support." Static answered, then silence. Kira felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. The signal wasn't reaching command. Someone had jammed it. "Gunny," she said quietly, "we're cut off. Someone's blocking the comms." He looked at her sharply. "How the hell would you know that?" She hesitated. "Pattern of interference, it's deliberate. These people aren't amateurs." Tors studied her a second longer, then nodded, trusting her instinct. "All right, Ghost, what's your call?" The nickname slipped out before he realized it. Ghost. She froze for half a heartbeat, then pushed the thought aside. "Split fire, draw them right. I'll flank left, cut their line of sight." Tors gave a short nod. "Do it." Kira slipped from cover, moving low and fast, a shadow against sunlight. Her steps were precise, silent. Every muscle remembered how to do this. She reached the far container stack, heart steady, lungs measured. Then she saw it, a small black device planted on the inner fence post. Compact, blinking red. Not an explosive. A data relay transmitter. Someone was siphoning comm traffic. She keyed her mic. Tors, this isn't a direct attack. They're stealing intel. Someone's trying to breach classified lines. How the hell do you know that? He asked again. Because I've seen it before, she said, voice low. A brief silence. Then what do you need? Cover me for 30 seconds. Copy that. Gunfire erupted again, louder this time. Kira used the distraction to move 3 strides, a slide to the fence, one sharp twist of her wrist as she pulled a concealed multi-tool from her boot. She disabled the relay in 12 seconds, not fast enough for the people watching. Because she knew she was being watched. From the corner of her eye, she caught the glint of a scope, high on the ridge, barely visible. Sniper! Before she could shout a warning, a shot rang out. The bullet struck inches from Tors, kicking dust into his face. He cursed, diving down. Kira's voice went sharp, commanding. Sniper, high ridge, northwest slope. Tors blinked. How did you? Just move. The squad scrambled for cover. Kira raised her rifle, found the shimmer of heat in the glass, and fired one clean shot. The ridge went still. No one moved for a full 10 seconds. Then Tors exhaled. That was impossible range with this sight. She didn't answer, just lowered her weapon, face unreadable. Reinforcements arrived minutes later. Colonel Ashford himself strode into the chaos, calm amid the static and dust. His eyes took everything in at once. The scattered shells, the broken comms, the shaken Marines. What happened here? Tors spoke first. Unknown infiltrators, sir. 3 total. Brennan identified and disabled their data relay before exfil. Ashford turned to her. Is that correct, Corporal? She met his gaze, every muscle composed. Yes, sir. His eyes held hers longer than protocol allowed. He knew. He always knew. Good work, he said finally, voice firm. You likely stopped a serious breach. Reeves, who'd arrived with the backup, stared between them, confusion and suspicion warring in his expression. Sir, how did she even identify a data relay? That's specialized tech. Ashford didn't blink. Because Corporal Brennan pays attention, something you should try more often. The rebuke landed clean and quiet. Reeves said nothing. As the colonel turned to coordinate the follow-up sweep, Tors leaned close to Kira. Ghost, he whispered under his breath, that was some next-level work. She didn't respond, just kept her eyes on the horizon where the ridge still glowed faintly in the sunlight. That night the base returned to uneasy calm. Official reports would call it a limited data breach attempt. No one would mention the sniper. No one would mention her. But word spread anyway. By lights out, everyone knew who had turned the tide that morning. No one mocked her now. No one dared. And yet, instead of pride, Kira felt only the familiar ache of isolation. Because the more they respected her, the less they knew her. She stood by her window, moonlight tracing her face. The mark on her shoulder burned faintly again, not in pain but in warning. Ghosts didn't belong in daylight. She whispered to herself, this isn't over. And somewhere out there, beyond the hills, a silent signal pulsed, a coded reply that no one else on base would ever notice. Phase 2 initiated. Why does silence always feel loudest after the storm? For 3 days, Camp Pendleton held its breath. The official report said the infiltration was neutralized, the comms restored, the threat contained. But those who'd seen it, who'd heard the gunfire and felt the tension rip through the air, knew better. Something was still wrong. The morning sun was pale and cold when Colonel Ashford stepped into Captain Hayes's office. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes were darker than usual, the kind of eyes that had stopped sleeping. Close the door, he said quietly. Hayes obeyed. Ashford placed a small, encrypted folder on the desk. That relay they planted, it was configured to siphon intel from a specific network. Hayes frowned. Hours. Ashford nodded. Hours, and not general traffic, classified movement logs. Someone knew what to target. Hayes's face tightened. Sir, you think this was an inside job, Ashford finished. I'm certain of it. He opened the folder, revealing a series of digital printouts, timestamps, encrypted pings, signal trails. And whoever did it knew how to bypass our firewall. That's not something an outsider could have done alone. Hayes scanned the pages. So what's the play? Ashford leaned back, voice low. We trace it quietly. No alerts. No panic. I'll need one person to help me move under the radar. Hayes hesitated. You're thinking Brennan. I'm knowing Brennan. He stood, packing slowly toward the window. She's the only one here who could have stopped that breach in time. She saw things the rest of us missed, and she still got clearance above mine, even if she doesn't admit it. Hayes exhaled. Sir, she's already walking a fine line. If she moves wrong, her cover. I'll handle the fallout, Ashford said. She deserves the truth, and this base deserves protection. When Kira got the summons to his office that evening, she already knew why. She entered standing at attention. Sir. Ashford looked up from his desk. At ease, Corporal, sit. She obeyed, posture still perfect. He studied her a moment, the calm exterior, the quiet precision, the kind of control only people who'd lived in the dark could master. I'll be direct, he said. We found traces of an inside leak. Someone helped the infiltrators. They had clearance codes that match our own systems. Kira didn't move, but her pulse quickened. Any suspects? 3 officially, he paused. Unofficially, too many. Her voice was quiet. You want me to find them? I want you to watch, he said. Quietly. No official record, no interference. If they realize you're involved, they'll go underground again. She nodded, understood. The colonel leaned forward, lowering his voice. There's one more thing. During the sweep, we recovered a fragment of encrypted data from that relay. It contained partial message headers, one of them linked to an old command chain. Code name, Serpent 9. Her blood ran cold. That name wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The Serpent program had been dismantled, buried under 10 layers of denial. She forced her expression still. Sir, that could be a coincidence. Ashford's gaze sharpened. You and I both know coincidences don't happen at this level. He handed her a file. Whatever this is, it's connected to you. I don't know how, and I don't want to unless I have to. Just find out who's feeding them intel before command does. Kira nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, sir. When she left the office, the sun was setting behind the hangars, bleeding red light across the tarmac, the kind of sunset that looked too beautiful for the kind of truth it covered. She walked toward the barracks in silence, file tucked under her arm, thoughts spinning. If the infiltrators knew about Serpent 9, that meant someone had access to the classified archives, maybe even her own operational records. Someone was hunting ghosts. That night, while the rest of the base slept, Kira worked. She sat at her desk, the glow of her encrypted laptop illuminating her face. The file the colonel gave her was thin, just timestamps and packet fragments, but to her, it was enough. She rerouted through secure layers, accessing channels only a handful of people in the country could still open. The trace led to a local terminal inside the base network. And not just anywhere. Logistics Division, Weapons Inventory Access Node. Kira's jaw tightened. That meant whoever was leaking data had access to shipment manifests and armory records, exactly the kind of intel that could be sold or weaponized. She copied the data to a secure drive, closed the laptop, and exhaled. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching down the hallway. She turned off the lamp, sliding silently to the side of the door. The footsteps stopped. A faint shadow appeared under the doorframe, someone standing there, not knocking, just listening. Kira's hand hovered near her sidearm, muscles coiled. After a few seconds, the shadow shifted. Then the footsteps receded, fading into the night. She waited until the silence returned, then opened the door. The corridor was empty. Only the faint hum of the lights remained. On the floor just outside her door was a folded scrap of paper. No markings. She picked it up, unfolded it. Inside, scrawled in clean block letters, "You're not the only one with a mark." Her stomach dropped. Someone knew. The next morning, Kira walked into the mess hall like nothing had happened. Her face calm, her steps measured. But every sound, every look, every whisper felt amplified. She scanned the room. Everyone looked ordinary, tired, hungry, bored, but now she knew how thin that mask could be. Tors caught her eye from across the room, nodding slightly. The only person she still half trusted. Reeves, meanwhile, sat at the far table, reading a report, pretending not to notice her. But when he stood to leave, she caught it, the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, something else. Suspicion, calculation. By noon, the base was alive again, vehicles moving, drills resuming, but the tension was everywhere. Every Marine could feel it, even if they didn't know why. Kira met the colonel near the perimeter fence just before sunset. He was alone, hands behind his back, eyes on the horizon. "Status?" he asked. "I found the leak," she said. "Or part of it. Someone in logistics division. They're accessing old files connected to the Serpent program, and they know I'm here." His jaw tightened. "Then we move fast." "No," Kira said quietly. "If we move now, they'll vanish. I can draw them out, but I'll need access to the comm center and full clearance to operate off-record." Ashford studied her face. "That's dangerous. If this goes wrong, command will hang both of us." She met his gaze. "It won't go wrong." The colonel nodded slowly. "Do what you need to do, just don't disappear again." For a moment, his voice softened, almost human. "I've lost enough good ghosts already." Kira looked away. "Then let's make sure you don't lose another." That night she slipped through the corridors of the comm center, silent, invisible. Her credentials overrode every lock. Her presence erased itself as soon as it appeared. On a security monitor near the entrance, the faint red light blinked again, just like the relay she destroyed days earlier. Someone was already inside. And when she turned the corner, her heart stopped. Because standing there, backlit by the glow of computer screens, was Staff Sergeant Reeves, typing rapidly, data feeds flickering across multiple displays. He turned slowly, realizing she was there. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Only one word formed in her mind, quiet, sharp, final. "Confirmed." Why does betrayal always come from the place that feels safest? The hum of the comm center servers was the only sound. Cold blue light washed over the walls, flickering against the steel of rifles and screens. Kira Brennan stood motionless at the entrance, breath slow, steady, her eyes locked on Staff Sergeant Reeves. He froze mid-keystroke, his hand hovering over the terminal. The air between them was electric, years of hostility condensed into one silent realization. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Reeves exhaled and straightened, voice quiet. "Guess you finally saw what you weren't supposed to." Kira didn't raise her weapon. "Not yet. What are you doing here?" "Finishing what someone else started." He stepped closer to the console, the reflection of code flickering across his face. "You think you're the only one who's been used by command, the only one carrying ghosts." Kira's voice stayed even. "You're leaking classified data to external channels. That's not justice, that's treason." Reeves laughed softly, but it wasn't cruel this time. It was tired. "Treason." Treason's just another word for knowing too much. He gestured toward the monitor's streams of encrypted data scrolling faster than her eyes could follow. You ever wonder what they did with us? The ones who gave everything. They bury us in files. They call it classified, but what it really means is forgotten. Kira's throat tightened. You're not one of us. I was, Reeves said quietly, before they erased my name, before I learned what the Serpent really meant. She took a slow step forward, keeping her tone calm. You were never in the program. That mark isn't yours. He turned, and for the first time she saw it faint, burned into his forearm. A serpent coiled around a sword, scarred and uneven. Her stomach sank. Where did you get that? Reeves smiled bitterly. From the same people who gave you yours. Only difference is you survived it. The realization hit like a blow. He wasn't lying. He'd been a recruit, one of the failures, one of the 92% who hadn't made it through. I was 20, he said, voice breaking. They promised purpose. Instead, they broke me and threw me away. So when the people you protect came knocking, I gave them what they wanted, proof that ghosts still walk the earth. Kira's weapon lowered a fraction. Reeves, you don't have to do this. He turned back to the terminal. It's already done. Her heart pounded. The screen flashed red data upload, 72% complete. Reeves, stop. He didn't turn. You think you can fix this with another lie. You think hiding behind the colonel makes you clean. She took another step forward, voice softer now. This isn't about clean. It's about who still gets to choose what's right when everything else is broken. For a second he hesitated. His hand hovered over the keyboard. Then the door burst open. Colonel Ashford stepped in, sidearm drawn. Step away from the console, Staff Sergeant. Reeves froze. His eyes darted between them, the colonel, the ghost, the truth he'd spent his whole life trying to expose. Sir, he said quietly, you think you know what your government protects. You don't. They build monsters and call them heroes. Ashford's voice was controlled but edged with sorrow. And you think selling those monsters to the highest bidder makes you better. Reeves's jaw clenched. No, but at least it makes me seen. Then his finger moved, not toward the trigger but toward the keyboard. Kira reacted first. One step, one clean motion, her hand slammed into his wrist, the weapon clattering away. The console sparked as her other hand yanked the power cord free. The upload froze at 97%. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Reeves shoved her backward, fury igniting. You don't get to decide what the world knows. They struggled, trained soldiers, both precise, both desperate. But this time Kira didn't hold back. Not for cover, not for image. Every motion was instinct, efficient, final. When it was over, Reeves lay on the floor, cuffed, breathing hard. The mark on his arm glistened with sweat, not pride. Ashford holstered his weapon, stepping closer. You just saved every man and woman on this base. Kira stared down at Reeves, her voice quiet. No, sir, I saved the silence. Reeves laughed weakly. And that's your curse, Brennan. They'll never let you stop being one of them. Ashford nodded to the MPs at the door. Take him. When they were gone, the colonel turned to her. You okay? She wiped a streak of blood from her sleeve. He was one of us once. Ashford sighed. And he's proof of why programs like that should have never existed. Kira looked at the frozen screen, the upload stalled just before completion. It doesn't matter. Someone else out there still knows. He nodded grimly. Maybe, but tonight you bought us time. For a moment they stood in silence. The hum of the servers filled the air again, low, constant, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Command will want a report, she said finally. I'll handle it, Ashford replied. Your name won't be in it, it never is. He started toward the door, then paused. Brennan, you ever think about walking away? She gave a small, tired smile. Every day, but ghosts don't retire, sir. They just fade quieter. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once a soldier's goodbye. You did good. When he left, the room felt larger, emptier. The blue glow of the monitors washed over her face, soft and cold. She took out her encrypted phone. A single message blinked on the screen. Operation contained. Authorization reset. Status. Shadow cleared. She typed a short reply. Requesting release from active cover. The response came seconds later. Denied. Remain in position. Watcher protocol engaged. Her eyes lingered on the words. Watcher, not operative, not soldier. Watcher, the title they gave to those who'd seen too much to let go. Outside, the sky was breaking into dawn. The base stirred laughter, engines, orders. The world turning again, unaware of how close it had come to falling apart. Kira stepped outside and stood by the flagpole as the sun climbed over the horizon. The wind caught her hair, the light touching the faint edge of the serpent mark beneath her collar. The mark no longer burned. It simply existed, a quiet reminder of what she'd lost and what she'd saved. Behind her, voices called cadence. The same Marines who had mocked her weeks ago now marched with heads high, unaware that the calm they walked in had been bought with someone else's silence. Kira watched them for a while, then whispered almost to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She turned and walked toward the hangars, boots steady against the concrete, her shadow long in the morning light. No medals, no glory, no applause. Just the sound of a ghost fading back into the world she'd quietly protected, unseen, unthanked, unforgotten. And somewhere deep in the network, in the places where secrets sleep, one old file remained encrypted under her name.